From CRI Simple Numbers, this is Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers podcast, a podcast for those championing market growth and anchoring the nation's economy, small businesses, and entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the Simple Numbers Profitability Playbook podcast. I'm Brandon Gray. We don't have Mike Maxson here this morning. He's out of the office today, but we've got a great guest that's going to kind of take his place, a Simple Numbers legend. Chris Andersen, founder and owner of SunCo Lawns. We could probably, Chris, do an entire episode of just kind of talking about everything that we've experienced in this journey from the last, probably 15, 18 years, something like that. It's been a fun ride.
No, something like that.
The reason we asked Chris to come on today, though, wasn't to talk about the past, it's to talk about the future. They're doing some really cool things that we're going to discuss. Also on the bleeding edge of a new labor efficiency indicator, and it's not coming from the area you think it may be. So that said, before we jump in with Chris, I'll tell you a little bit more about he and SunCo in just a second. Reminder, Simple Numbers Conference, November 9th through 11th in Austin, Texas. Go to simplenumbersummit.com and make sure you reserve your spots. It's been really cool to see folks reaching out, signing up, questions and what have you. If you're interested in sponsoring the event as well, we do have a few sponsorship opportunities still available. We've got a couple that signed up last week, as a matter of fact. But if you're interested in that, contact me. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn, email me, use the contact form on our website. There's 1,000 ways to find us, and we're happy to tell you more about that. So enough of the commercials. Let's get to the podcast. So as I said, Chris Andersen, SunCo Lawns. SunCo and Chris were actually patient zero in the current Simple Numbers process. So, like I said, they go way back with us. Chris is a member of our Simple Numbers Mastermind. Things like, you may have heard, green grass, no weeds, if you're in the Omaha market, born from the Simple Numbers Mastermind. And so Chris is just a brilliant entrepreneur. They have integrated Simple Numbers into the culture of their company, to the fabric of every decision that they make. Runs a really great business, and so we're excited to have him on here today. So, Chris, I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I appreciate that introduction. It feels a little strange to hear that it's been at least 15 years. You say it might be more like 18. I'm trying to remember when exactly I saw Greg for the first time speak at an entrepreneur organization event, and I latched onto that concept, that LER concept that he has. And I'm proud of my team for understanding at least everything above the contribution margin line was what we want them to understand what they can control and labor in the past. And when we'll get into it, it was that biggest lever. So it's interesting what we're coming full circle now from a labor model and how we control that to now robotics that we'll get into.
Robotics. So let's talk a little bit about this shift and this change that you're making. So for those who, excuse me, for those who aren't up to speed on the latest in landscaping technology, there are these really cool robots that are starting to become very, very prominent. Been out for a long time. Homeowners have been using them for a while. And the technology has evolved greatly even in the past couple of years. I know Chris and I were talking, there's models that are being released this year that the technology has even vastly improved from what we saw last year. So it's a very quickly changing industry. Chris at SunCo, they specialize on more so the commercial side of the house whenever it comes to a lot of the landscaping things as well. And so that's an even newer kind of concept. Residential robotic mowing's probably been around longer than folks trying to deploy it, use it more so on the commercial side of the house. And so this brought about some really interesting analysis. And, depending upon what business that you're in, the impact of robotics, and I'll throw for the service industry AI in there because it is to some degree, the robotic equivalent, as you look at services, are completely kind of changing in some instances how we look at things like profitability, and labor efficiency targets, and what have you there. So, Chris, kind of just give a little background of kind of what got you headed down this path to start looking more at transitioning over to robotic services.
Yeah, it was interesting. A little about it was around 4 years ago, and I think you'll probably remember being on a couple calls with myself and my wife and Greg and you. We had a large platform company in our industry, like a $500 million company that knocked on our door. And even though we weren't quite ready to sell or think about that yet, we thought it was worth going down a path with them to kind of see what they valued. And I remember talking to the CEO of this company after we had kind of decided we were going to step away from going any further. And the CEO ended our call by saying, "Make sure you're paying attention to robotics." And when a guy running a $500 million company tells you to pay attention to robotics, I thought I should probably do that. So at the time, on the commercial side, and even on the residential side, Europe is actually way like 5 years to 8 years ahead of us on this. That you see these robots on residential yards over in Europe, all over, but in the States here, it really it hadn't caught on yet, and we were seeing the pioneers kind of getting out there. We wanted to wait for the technology to catch up, so it was more scalable both on the commercial and residential side. And so I would say about 18 months ago is when we said, okay, that technology's here now. They had got, you used to have to put the line in the ground. It was setting it up was a pain, and it wasn't quite there yet. So we didn't want to be the pioneer. We didn't want arrows in our backs. We wanted to be early adopters, and we feel like that's where we are right now. Early adopters on both and honestly, the model keeps changing, Brandon. We started out by wanting to be robotic mowing as a service, both residential and commercially. So not necessarily replacing employees. Well, I shouldn't say that. These robotic mowers just give there's a better outcome. The grass looks better. We're finding now that you can use less of the traditional fertilizers, less water. It's just, it's mowing every day, and it's exciting. We feel like right now that with the technology that probably 95% of residential yards can get mowed with a robot. And we feel pretty bullish that right now on the commercial side, it's 40 to 50% of our total square footage can get done.
Wow.
We're still struggling with that. How does that robot transition from one area to another in a commercial setting? So that's kind of the constraint there.
Crazy times that we live in, right? 20 years ago, probably never would have thought we're going to be discussing robotic efficiency and what have you for lawn care, but it's here. And I think that's a testament to, regardless of what industry we're in, you got to look to embrace it. And I'll highlight something Chris said there that I really like, that they didn't want to be on the cutting edge. They wanted the technology to develop a little bit because, it could be substantial time and money lost had they adopted too early. And if you're familiar with some of those robotic systems that he mentioned, you'd have to go out and bury wiring so that it knew where to go and not go and what have you. So very labor intensive and setup intensive and what have you. And now it's gotten to the point where that's not needed. So I guess it was probably, Chris, it's probably about a year ago. As I was kind of looking back and we started having some real conversations around, all right, we're doing this. How do we track this? So like I said a moment ago, Chris's company was a very early adopter of the labor efficiency metrics. And they have, you talk about a team that watches labor efficiency, makes decisions based upon it. Their team understands it. That is part of their culture. And so I'll just give you an example. These numbers aren't the exact numbers, but just so people can kind of understand. Let's say that Chris and his team historically were looking at like I don't know, a 275 direct LER. And the first time we ran that LER but used a robot instead of a person, it was like a 975. And so it just blew his team's mind. And so that got conversation started around, are we looking at this properly? Because there are some adjustments that you have to kind of start to look at the way that we track simple numbers LER whenever you substitute a robot for a human. That's a little bit of a different calculation. So Chris, kind of walk us through as you guys have started down this path of looking at the efficiencies of the robot, things that, you guys have kind of realized that may be a little bit different than whenever you're looking at it for humans.
Yeah, no, it's a great, the whole, I call it owner's intuition. We were trying to make this shift from labor efficiency to like a model that relied on an asset. And we were having a hard time getting our heads around that. When you look at that number, that LER number, that projection that we had, Brandon, I remember talking to you and being so excited about, geez, this could go from our lowest LER service we provide to possibly one of our highest by, double or triple on some of our other services we do. And it was kind of raising some red flags. And we after thinking through it with you, we developed a whole new robotic efficiency ratio. So yeah, we feel very proud to be early adopters of LER, and now I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're probably early adopters of robotic efficiency ratio, which is just that big shift from with labor. We're looking at that every week, Brandon, and you can make adjustments in labor, whether it's like, hey, that crew is too heavy or that route isn't dense enough. But when you switch to that asset model, it's just a different way of thinking. It's you don't have the luxury of, if it's a 3 to 5 year life of that robot, you get it wrong out of the gates. That's, you're not talking changing things in a week. I'm all of a sudden I'm sitting on a 3-year asset that if it's priced wrong, we're in big trouble. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that sound there kind of where we were coming from?
Oh, without a doubt. And so, I think you bring up an interesting point around the flexibility. So, if you kind of look and say, we think we have these jobs, these projects upcoming, let's go ahead and invest in people. If something happens, and we don't want it to, but whether we priced it incorrectly, we can sometimes change the efficiency. We can go with less people in some cases. If a project falls off, we can reduce payroll. And we're hopefully most everybody listening is taking that flexible labor approach whenever it comes, especially to direct labor. When you invest in an asset, though, your only option is to try to resell that asset at most likely a very discounted value from whenever you purchased it. And it's not like one of those things to where, we'll use the robotic mowers, for example. You're going and buying one or two of these things. You're buying a fleet of them. Because once you commit, you got to go in. So now I've got a substantial investment in these assets that, like I said, my only option is if this doesn't work, I got to try to sell it at a very discounted value. So it is a different, yes, it can be a very high return on investment, but back to those concepts around return on investment. It's a high return because it can be a high risk. And, Chris mentioned something there whenever it came to kind of the pricing side. So kind of share with the listeners, Chris, some of the challenges that you started to see as the market is starting to change a little bit around robotics and the use of, and how that has created opportunities and issues from a pricing standpoint.
Yeah. So initially, I think ultimately, as the price, I was just recently out at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and you usually don't think of lawn care and technology, but I mean, there had to be 25 different robotic companies, mainly out of China. They're showing off humanoid robots, pool cleaners, mowers. So the reason I say that, I do feel like the price of these mowers is going to come down over time, and ultimately it's going to save, whether you're a commercial customer or you're a residential customer, it's going to wind up saving you money in the future versus traditional, that weekly traditional mowing. But we had to make some assumptions going into this in terms of, okay, what model of robot, use the residential side right now. What model of robot based on square footage do you need? What can we line that up so it's similar to what traditional mowing was? We own the asset. That's what we started with, and pricing that out. Then we kind of got into that. Okay, what's the expected useful life? What percentage of the revenue per year is going to be set aside for what we'd call like repair allowances, blade changes, things like that. So we came out of the gate with that robotic mowing as a service, and we've evolved now to really 3 different models. So uh, robotic mowing as a service is we own the asset. We come out, we turnkey it, we set it up for you, we tune it just like you tune an instrument. These robots and AI, you have to tune them, right? They're not smart enough just to sit down and go mow. You've got to set it up right. You've got to set no-go zones. You've got to map the property in the right way so that robot's not getting stuck and you're spending unnecessary labor to go out there. So that mowing as a service also includes a weekly visit by what used to be on a residential side, maybe a 2 or 3 man crew. Now a 1-man crew can go do that detail work once a week. And we feel pretty comfortable that that number is around 100 customers a week could be serviced by one, we're going to call it robotic mowing tech. And what's interesting too, we're seeing, even maybe we can get into this, but we're seeing a different type of applicant right now applying for that. It might be somebody who's technology savvy, who doesn't mind being outside. It's kind of, typically we don't have a lot of women applying for those jobs, and we do now. We've seen an uptick in females applying for those jobs. So I think it's interesting to see what's going to happen this year. Last year was our first full blown. We just put an order in for 100. Our goal is to at least place 100 of these robots, both commercially and residentially this year. And just from the feedback we're getting, we haven't even started marketing to our 4,500 person customer base, our active customers. I'm not worried about selling 100 robots, Brandon. I'm worried about, are we set up to be successful, right?
Yes, Chris makes an interesting point there. What was that?
Well, I was just going to share the story. My wife makes fun of me, says this robot that I've had at my house for the last just a little over a year. I'll come home at night and I wind up standing in the yard just watching it. And I think a lot of people name them. It's fun to watch people stop on the street and be like, "What is that?" So yeah, I'm not worried about selling them.
That's cool. Well, Chris made a great point there around technology, and I think this is something that, on the cusp doesn't show up, in that the cost of that technology is starting to decline more and more. And so, you're going to have, and this impacts your pricing model. We got pricing now based upon the technology cost and the marketplace for traditional mowing, because there's an alternative, right? So you got to kind of stay within that. We've got to also make sure that we're getting the right efficiency, not only on the robotic use, return on asset purchase from that, but also the tech, and then the back office labor involved in this, because now instead of, it changes your scheduling, you're going to have, the mowers get stuck. You're going to have issues with them. You got to get the right people out there to do all that. So your pricing to consider those kind of things. And we're doing all this, and next year, all the pricing may change because the technology cost changes. And so I don't know if there's many people listening. Message me if this is the case. So where you're in an environment to where your labor costs are steadily declining. Well, with technology, that's what a lot of folks are going to be experiencing. The cost of that asset is declining over time. And so it's changing the pricing metrics and the pricing model. And so we did a lot of work with Chris to kind of go through and try to really somewhat of an experiment. I told him he's on the cutting edge of RER, robotic efficiency ratio, of what is the true cost if this was not a robot but a human. Are we looking at this correctly? Chris mentioned downtime with maintenance. That was one of the things that we went through and had to consider. If it gets stuck, what percentage of time do we think we're going to have to send somebody out? What's the cost of these assets? And we looked at the depreciation over the course of the years with those potential replacements for the units. We created this pretty, I'll give Chris's team, a real pat on the back here, a really cool spreadsheet, because you got to have a spreadsheet, right, to track LER. On all these different factors and the variables. And when we got done with it, we were both kind of going, this is almost a no-brainer. So 2 things here, Chris, I want you to hit on, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So one, you mentioned the change in the type of personnel that you're starting to attract. So speak a little bit more about that, and as you kind of see that changing over the future.
Yeah, I just, with the things that I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, not only the robots, but drone technology right now as it applies to I'll broadly call it the green industry, which I'm in, where you can start having targeted weed sprays, large trees getting treated. The technology is coming, and I mean, I could foresee on the commercial side somebody managing mowers from an office, a tech savvy person who like maybe isn't a college grad even, just somebody who understands technology, leans in. But we hired a what we're referring to, and I might have got this from the mastermind group, but that concept of a reverse mentor. So a young person who understands technology, who can follow you around and say, why are you doing this like that? Like, there's an easier way to do that. So we've hired an AI intern who's actually building out agents for our guys. My message to my people right now is you still need to be really good at managing people and culture, but you're also going to have to manage agents moving forward. That AI and robotics is taking work and changing it, and literally, I think my job used to be to think out 3 years, and I think that's changed to thinking out 3 months right now. That's how quickly technology is changing, and you just got to be ready to pivot. Like you said, what's coming out this year in July is gonna make last year's robots look, I don't want to say obsolete, but that's one of our selling points too, Brandon, is like, I think there's a market for people to who believe in that. I want to lease technology right now. I don't want to own it because it's changing so fast. I'll let SunCo, take that risk. Just, you put the coolest new version out there as they come out. And obviously we're not going to do that every year, but we hope to get at least 3 years out of these robots. And I think it's going to be closer to 5, which, when we did that math, you get closer to 5, you're really cooking with gas then.
Yeah. Last question, Chris. What has been the reaction of your competitors?
I have one large competitor in town that I'm friendly with, they've leaned into this too. And we're friendly enough that our teams have scheduled a time in March where we're going to get together. We really feel like we can kind of dictate the market here locally right now, or at least in the Midwest. I'm not advocating like collusion here, but I think if we can, we probably both have similar overhead structures. And I think it's smart for if a couple of big players come in and decide, this is what we think the market is. I just don't see a lot of people latching on. We're eager to we're converting a panel van into this new robotic mower or robotic mowing technician, where we want to go to all, electric handheld equipment too, which is, that could be a whole new discussion, but all that stuff has really come full circle now and is available, and we think scalable for our kind of business.
Good stuff, Chris. It's been cool to kind of hear your thoughts on this. And for the listeners, here's kind of the takeaway and what I want you guys to get thinking about. I think we're all very aware, unless you've been living under a rock, technology is definitely impacting not only today, but the future to a large degree. And this is coming from a company that cuts grass, right? Treats grass, does snow removal, embracing it. And so whatever it is you're doing, you better believe you better be embracing it without a doubt. The metrics that you've looked at historically are going to need to be altered and changed. So we experienced this as we start looking at labor efficiency and putting new targets in place. You're going to have to take some risks and make some assumptions, because until you go out and we start deploying all these, you just don't know. So you got to kind of somewhat hedge your bets. But the only way to kind of figure it out is to get your uniform dirty. And so we got to make sure we're doing that as far as that part is concerned. And the type of team members that you have in 10 years may be much different than the team members you have today. Not better or worse, but just different. And so, your whole recruiting philosophy. So as you kind of start looking at this, and I think this is one of the things that got Chris really excited about it, is it was the rebirth of a company. The way we provide services, the assets that we use, the marketing initiatives that we're taking, the team members that we're attracting, this is all brand new relative to what we have been doing the last, 30 years?
Yeah, no, it has given me a boost, Brandon, to say the least. It's really, it's taken me from thinking I was in the last couple innings of my kind of my career or business owner career at 34 years now, and I want to keep going. I'm so excited about this stuff. It's fun.
Well, Chris, we'll have to have you on maybe at the end of the summer to do a postmortem of kind of how all this went. But I appreciate your time, man. It was great to chat and tell all of our listeners about this. If you got questions on it, holler at me. If you want to talk to Chris, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to kind of chat with you too. Let me know. We'll get you connected with the man, the myth, the legend, Grim Grass No Weeds himself. So for everybody listening in, we appreciate you listening. Be sure to share the podcast. Reminder on Simple Numbers Summit, simplenumbersummit.com. Go and register today, and we'll be ready to rock and roll again next week.
If you want to know more about driving sustainable profitability for your business or are interested in learning more about CRI Simple Numbers, please visit our website at simplenumberscri.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast. You can subscribe to Profitability Playbook on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a review. This podcast is brought to you by CRI Simple Numbers LLC, a division of CRI Capital Group LLC, and a subsidiary of CRI Advisors LLC. CRI is the trusted brand under which Carr, Riggs & Ingram LLC, the CPA firm, and CRI Advisors LLC, along with its subsidiaries, deliver professional services. Please note, Carr, Riggs & Ingram LLC is a licensed independent CPA firm offering attest services, whereas CRI Advisors LLC and its subsidiaries specialize in providing tax and business consulting services. These entities operate within an alternative practice structure as defined by the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct and comply fully with applicable laws, regulations, and professional standards. Ready to simplify your business finances and drive growth? Explore valuable resources, books, and tools designed for entrepreneurs and small businesses at simplenumberscri.com.